Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Gabe Arnold, and I'm the Technical Director for the DLC. We're excited to share this information we have with you today. This will now be DLC's third year of our Network Lighting Controls Qualified Products List, and we'll be going over today DLC's now final version 3.0 specification that underpins it. We very much appreciated all of your participation, your input, and your support as we've been building this new resource to accelerate the adoption of this technology in the market. In addition to providing an overview of the specification changes with you today, we'll also be announcing a new structure to support families of network lighting control products with reduced application fees. First, I'd like to start with some logistics. We have a large group here today, so all attendees will remain on mute through the duration of the webinar. We'd like you to use the question pane of the webinar interface to ask any questions that you have, and we strongly encourage you to go ahead and do that and let us know any questions or comments that you have. We'll be answering as many of these as we can as we go using the webinar interface, and at the end of the webinar, we may go over some that were received with the full audience. In any case, we'll make sure to get you answers to any of the questions that were asked, whether it's during the webinar today or following it. Next, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, and that is Levin Knock. Levin has been with the DLC since 2016, and he's the program manager that manages this network lighting control specification, as well as the qualified products list. I know many of you that have been participating with DLC and providing input to these specifications and then qualifying their systems have worked with Levin through this process. So with that, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us, and I'll turn things over to Levin.
Thanks, Gabe. So today I'll introduce this recent 3.0 release of the DLC technical requirement for network lighting controls, and then explore the main changes from last year's version. Topics 2 through 5, energy monitoring through DCPoE, are all relatively brief. We'll go through most of these topics quickly and then spend some time getting into a few details on cybersecurity, before ending with a mention of the DLC stakeholders meeting that's coming up in July. The technical requirement is an 11-page document with a few pages of text at the beginning, followed by 3 tables. The changes from last year are highlighted in yellow. Each table has a list of 23 capabilities or functions that a networked lighting control system can perform. Table 1 applies to interior systems. On the left, these 7 capabilities are required for all products on the DLC Qualified Products List, or QPL. If a system does not qualify to perform any of these 7 basic functions, then it is not on the list. Note that there may be a difference between what a system is capable of and what is actually installed on each project. For example, if a building has no windows, no skylights, no daylight at all, then a contractor might choose not to install any photo sensors for daylight harvesting in that particular project. That's okay, provided that the system has a photo sensor available that could be installed on a different project that has windows. On the right, these 16 capabilities are reported and not required. If a system has some of these capabilities, then it is reported on the QPL to help specifiers select appropriate systems for various projects. But a system can still be qualified on the list whether or not it has any of these optional capabilities shown on the right. Table 2 is very similar to Table 1, except that it applies to exterior systems where scheduling is required, in addition to the other 7 capabilities required for interior. Table 3 shows DLC's definition for each of the 23 capabilities. This 11-page document is available online at designlights.org by selecting Lighting Controls and then Technical Requirements, and then downloading the PDF. The DLC updates the technical requirement for controls every year to keep up with the rapid pace of change in the industry. The new requirement was published on June 1st, and now all of the qualified products are in the process of requalifying under the new requirement. This year, we expect that most products on the list will meet the new requirement. But if that's not feasible, then a product has 1 year grace period to remain on the list under last year's requirement before either upgrading or dropping off the following June. This timeline summarizes the stakeholder engagement process for the update that began in January, ran through the spring, and was recently completed in June. The first update that I'll describe is energy monitoring. The technical requirement describes a multi-year plan for energy monitoring. This year, energy monitoring is reported like it was last year. Incentives for some utility programs might depend on this optional capability. Next year, starting in June 2019, all products will need to be capable of energy monitoring. Like the daylight harvest example that I mentioned earlier, some contractors might choose to install energy monitoring on some projects and not on others. But at least it's available if they want to install it, because energy monitoring is very important to the utility efficiency programs that use the DLC list to administer rebates and incentives. As soon as an ANSI standard is available to describe the accuracy of energy monitoring by networked lighting controls, then DLC will refer to that standard. In the meantime, before a standard is available, DLC will refer to the self-reported accuracy of direct measurement methods that are based on measuring the actual current that flows into devices. In June 2020, systems that calculate the energy usage based on the dimming level and nominal wattage will no longer be accepted unless they are supported by then by a new ANSI standard for accuracy. The next topic is about new requirements for documentation. We've introduced a new requirement for customer available information. In order for an applicant to claim a capability listed in tables 1 and 2 that I showed above for interior and exterior systems, the manufacturer's customer literature must specify that the system has the capability, and also with instructions for how to configure and/or use this feature. And then the second paragraph has details about what we mean by customer available information. Going back to table 1, that means that in order to claim any of the 16 capabilities that are not crossed out here, the product literature needs to tell how to configure and/or use each capability. This does not apply to every single answer in the whole application. To actually get on the list, each manufacturer fills out a long application with many, many questions. And so it's not about the hundreds of questions where every single answer has to be in the customer information. It's just owning these main capabilities to say that at least the customers know this is available and you know how to use it. And so it's a yes or no, does the system have this basic capability? This year, we're introducing the concept of product families in the definition of a system and the listing fee. This is not actually in the technical requirement, but the change happened on the same June 1st timeline, so I wanted to mention it here. For lighting controls, a family consists of a parent system plus additional child systems that are mostly similar to the parent, but with some differences. The simplest case is for a system that covers exterior applications in addition to interior applications. So the exterior application would be the child and the interior would be the parent. Here is the fee structure where the parent system would be qualified in the single column and then additional child systems would be qualified in the family member column. If you have a group of systems that you think might qualify for this structure, please email info@designlights.org to confirm the plan ahead of time for how exactly to handle the multiple applications. Version 3 of the technical requirement is the first version to accept control systems that use DC power or power over Ethernet. DLC is getting ready to accept solid-state lighting applications for direct current DC and for power over Ethernet in September 2018. We are currently accepting controls applications for DC and power over Ethernet, but we will not publicly qualify any new systems until the corresponding luminaires, lamps, and kits all become available this fall when the SSL list is updated. So, the big topic today is cybersecurity. This year, DLC will start reporting compliance with some cybersecurity standards that I'll review in a minute. We're in the process this year of learning more about these standards, so the definition this year is a bit vague. By June 2019, with stakeholder engagement in the meantime, the goal is to establish a clear definition of what exactly it means to claim the optional cybersecurity capability on the DLC QPL. And then in June 2020, that optional capability that was clearly defined in June 2019 will be required starting in June 2020. Now I'll give an overview of the relevant standards under consideration that we know of at the moment. ANSI UL 2900 is a test standard for cybersecurity for network connectable products. It was first published by UL in 2015 and then approved as an ANSI standard in July 2017. It tells how to evaluate a product's vulnerability to security threats. In other words, it's a test to run on network devices where they analyze the system for vulnerabilities and then try to hack it. They also provide consulting support to help designers pass the test. Both integrated circuits and software are built of many building blocks or modules. Many of these building blocks come from open sources, and some of them have known vulnerabilities to hacking. One big part of the test is to take an inventory of all the different building blocks and then check whether any of these blocks are vulnerable to attack. The company itself makes that inventory and checks with some supervision and oversight by the certifying lab. ANSI UL 2900-1 is the general standard for network connectable devices. You can learn more about this in a recording of a 1-hour webinar at the link there that introduces UL 2900 in relation to lighting systems. The slides from today and the webinar recording will be posted on the DLC website in case you want to find that URL later. A few sectors have created a modified version of the basic standard to apply to their particular field: healthcare, industrial control, and life safety. In theory, the lighting industry could do something similar. We know that multiple qualified systems have already received ANSI UL 2900 certification, and several others are considering it. Now we'll move on to IEC 62443. This series of standards has a bunch of different documents for different applications. It's been in development since 2005, first by an American industry group and later with the International IEC Standards Group. The first one, the -2-4, applies to a whole corporation. And the -4-1 applies to the design department that's developing a product, but not to the overall corporation. And then -4-2 applies to a particular product. So -4-2 is the document here that is most similar to UL 2900. And finally, this is a fairly recent standard, but it is a modification of -3-3, which has already been published and is certifiable. So we're aware of two ways to get certified to the IEC 62443 standard. ISASecure is one way that they've accredited multiple labs, and also IECEE has also accredited labs. So those are two paths. You can look at those websites and find particular labs that can do these tests for various members of the 62443 family. And in particular, ISASecure offers these three certifications through the labs that they have accredited, where you can see the different suffixes. The first one would be -4-2 and -4-1 for that's more product related, and -4-1 is for the particular department designing the product. And then number 2, the system security assurance, would also include the -3-3. That's a more general high-level system question. And then the bottom one would just be for the design phase, which would probably happen before the product had been released. And these are, this slide here was taken from a report from last year, where the whole report is about how to apply this standard to the building control systems, which is mainly related to HVAC and other building control systems, but they also mention lighting control systems. And so this standard, one of the features of it is that you can get certified to 4 different security assurance levels. The first one would be making sure you don't get hacked by accident, where someone just stumbles across something they shouldn't get into, and then it gets progressively more serious with a generic hacker or a really dedicated hacker or even a nation state. And this is another good report that came out recently from Schneider Electric with an overview of 62443. So the next one I'll talk about is ISO/IEC 27000. Some people may be familiar with ISO 9000 family related to quality. Well, this is a similar family related to cybersecurity. And this standard helps organizations keep their own information assets secure. So it's about the whole organization. It's not really about the product, but it is about the organization. So this is in this broad realm of cybersecurity, there are different aspects there, and so that's one of the main ways that to distinguish these different standards. Some apply to the actual product. When you install this product in your building, how likely is it that someone will hack it? That's a really important question. The other question, which is slightly less relevant but still interesting, is overall the manufacturer who developed that product, how likely is it that they have been hacked? And so that's what ISO 27000 addresses. And so this particular standard is a global standard. Most of the adoption has been in Asia and Europe, but there is also a little bit of adoption in North America as well. I also wanted to mention NEMA has published a couple of guidelines on best practices for cybersecurity. And one of the advantages of these are not standards, well, they're not certifications, but they are relatively brief. So in the space of 10 or 20 pages, you can get kind of a high-level view of cybersecurity. And finally, the NIST Cybersecurity for IoT program is a vast network of interrelated documents that with many guidelines for what to do about cybersecurity. Even on this main web page here, you can see I could have scrolled down and seen lots and lots of more stuff. So it's not entirely clear to me exactly what a certification to this system will look like, but there are several independent third-party auditors who offer audits related to this. So we plan to report this, at least for this year, to report the results of those audits as well. And that was most of the substance of this webinar. So I wanted to add a brief ad that the stakeholder meeting is coming up July 9th to 11th in Boston. And this is the agenda for the first day. I realize this is last minute, but if you're not planning to attend, you may still be able to get here. We will start with a meeting Monday morning of utility members, and then some classes in the afternoon. Then on Tuesday will be the main day of panels and structured networking, and the same on Wednesday. And so here are the panels. The future of lighting, specifically related to lighting programs and efficiency rebates and incentives. And then outdoor lighting, the question of blue light and health effects and harmful effects. We'll talk about DLC version 5.0, which is the next big revision on the solid state lighting side. And then we'll have some case studies from network lighting controls and also a panel on horticultural lighting. And also discussion sessions following up for where we can talk about some of the panels that were presented. We also have on Monday these pre-conference workshops, including a half-day class on controls training that you need to specifically sign up for that ahead of time if you want to do that one. And I think, yes, we're at the questions. So I will check in with Damon, my colleague, who has been monitoring the question pane.
Thank you, Levin. Great job. We've received a few questions, mostly have to do with security. Our first question is from Harsha Banavara, and they say, the list of standards you mentioned, IEC 62443, a few parts, UBL 2900, are specific to product systems or components, whereas ISO 27000 and NIST are applicable to an overall organization. Since we have standards applicable, presumably this is their organization themselves, applicable to both organizations and components, DLC should advocate one or the other. And I know that our overall stance is kind of a take the measure of the market, but I was wondering if you could perhaps answer or respond to that a little more specifically than my own abilities.
Sure. I would say that our goal is over the next year to narrow things down and clarify. When we originally proposed just to look at standards relevant to products, and we got a lot of feedback that manufacturers wanted to say that if they were meeting one of these standards that applies to the whole organization, they wanted to be able to let people know about that in some way. So I expect that will be a hot topic of debate next spring as to what exactly qualifies as what do you need to do? Do you need to do both, qualify the product and also qualify the organization? Is just doing one or the other good enough? Is just doing products good enough? That's an open question at the moment. So this year we're just reporting information, but what exactly we'll advocate for will become much clearer over this year as we get more feedback.
Thanks, Levin. And feedback is an important part. Harsha also asked a follow-up question that I think you may have answered in part already, pointing out that selecting even only specific requirements within NIST or ISO 27001, there's the product specific or system specific aspects of those might make a good baseline, and then advise that there should be a panel to pick such requirements as part of our stakeholder outreach process. They're suggesting that as well, which I think we will be doing.
Yes, we will definitely have an active stakeholder engagement process, and we haven't defined yet exactly what that'll look like, but there will definitely be opportunities for stakeholder input, definitely.
Thank you, Levin. Another question just came in from Aaron Feldman asking, how is the energy monitoring required to be reported? Can it just be stored in the luminaire? Must it be transferred to the cloud, or must it be hardwired to a server?
That's a good question. So it needs to be available at a central location. So if it's just stored on the luminaire, it could be stored there, but there needs to be some way to stand in one place in the building and get the information, as opposed to, for instance, querying every luminaire individually, or maybe stand in a room and it needs to be at least one step up centralized. It does not have to be in the cloud. If it was only on site, that would certainly still qualify.
So if you were to say describe a product in which watt-hour odometry is stored on the luminaire and is technically recoverable, but not so via some kind of a centralized system, you wouldn't view that as having qualified.
Right.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That is the extent of the questions we've received so far.
Well, it looks.
Sorry.
Oh, here we are.
David Johnson's asking, did I understand correctly that each luminaire must have metered power to report this capability? Do you think it would be good to go back to the phased implementation slide to answer this question, Levin?
That's a good idea. Let me see how fast I can switch back through here. There we are.
So might the answer be that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I need to pull up there we are, the definition of energy monitoring. Energy monitoring. So the capability of a system to report the energy consumption of a luminaire and/or a group of luminaires. The use of energy monitoring on dedicated lighting circuits is also acceptable. So to go back to David's question, no, the use of energy monitoring on dedicated lighting circuits is also acceptable.
And also that inferred values as a basic lookup tables would be allowable in this phase, as well as direct metering and sampling. Is that correct?
Yes. Right. Right. The inferred methods are still accepted in 2019. They will not be accepted starting in June 2020 unless there's a new standard to support to describe their accuracy.
Got it. So if there are lookup tables that are in use, and if those can pass the ANSI accuracy and precision standards, then they would presumably be allowed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, and then Harsha asked about the when will we start cybersecurity. We really haven't defined yet, but if we follow the procedure we've been following, it'll be January. But there's a chance it might be sooner because there's a lot of talking to do. So yeah, it might possibly be this fall. We just haven't defined that yet. And then it looks like Roy Harvey just sent a question. The definition of personal control says a wireless dimmer switch may only be considered a personal control interface if product documentation shows the physical configuration is suitable for workstation use, etc. And so the question is, should that be that is or example? No, that is. That's the example. Is a small self-contained physical configuration suitable for workstation use. So it would have no external wiring.
So I think the question was about if it should be IE or versus EG.
At the moment, it's meant to be IE. It's like that's what we meant. But I guess if we come across other examples that where installations are using them broadly across many workstations and they've actually been deployed, then we could consider changing that. That's a good question for the future to possibly allow for more innovation. But the specific concern was that a wireless dimmer switch does not count if you have to wire it up to the electricity, because that's not something you can plop down on your desk. Let's see.
We had one other question at the beginning, Levin. Might as well mention to everyone. And the question was, will the slides be available after the webinar? And the slides, as well as the recorded version of the webinar, will be posted to the DLC website within the next few days. So you can look for it there.
Thanks. Well, we can stay on for a minute if there are no more questions, but it appears that concludes the webinar. Thank you very much for joining in.